The city lights blurred through the rain as Thomas Forrester's car pulled into the emergency lot, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a force that turned his knuckles white. He didn't remember most of the drive, only the siren in his head, the one that had started the moment his phone rang and hadn't stopped since. "There's been an accident," the voice had said. Just 3 words, clinical and hollow. But the silence that followed carried everything Thomas needed to know. Douglas. When he reached the hospital doors, the smell of antiseptic hit him first. That cold, sterile scent that always seemed to cling to tragedy. A nurse met him in the hallway, her expression the same practiced blend of compassion and attachment he had seen too many times before. He didn't hear her words, something about an accident at the crosswalk, about how they did everything they could. The hallway tilted. His knees weakened. It wasn't until he felt the walls pressing against him that he realized he had stopped breathing. Outside, the storm deepened. Rain hammered against the glass, a cruel echo of the chaos inside him. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped steadily, reminding him that life went on, even when his had just ended. It took him almost an hour to move again, to stand, to find his voice long enough to make the call he had been dreading. Hope answered on the first ring, her voice bright, distracted, full of the soft energy of a woman preparing for her wedding. "Thomas? What's wrong?" she asked, laughter still in her tone. He tried to speak, but nothing came. The silence stretched until it broke her calm. "Thomas?" she repeated, her voice trembling now. He swallowed hard. "It's Douglas," he managed. "There's been an accident." He didn't remember what happened after that, only fragments. Hope's voice cracking, her footsteps as she ran, the chaos at the bridal studio as he arrived to find her still in her fitting gown, veil trembling like a ghost's wing. She looked at him once, and in that single glance she knew. No words were needed. The world collapsed quietly around them. Hope fell to her knees, clutching the fabric of her dress like it was the only thing holding her to the earth. The mirrors around her reflected the scene in cruel repetition, grief from every angle, multiplied endlessly. The wedding that was supposed to symbolize rebirth became an open grave for everything she believed in. That night, Los Angeles seemed to stop breathing with her. In the days that followed, condolences poured in, friends, family, even strangers. Everyone said the same things. It was an accident. It wasn't anyone's fault. Time will heal. But the words slid off her like rain on glass. Hope felt detached from the world, as if her body was moving through it while her soul lingered somewhere else, frozen in that moment by the crosswalk, where sirens screamed and her child lay motionless. Thomas handled the practicalities because Hope couldn't. He made the calls, signed the papers, arranged the memorial. He became a ghost moving through tasks that felt mechanical and obscene in their normalcy. He didn't cry, not in front of anyone. His grief was a quiet, simmering thing, contained, disciplined, and dangerous. Liam was the first to suggest that they hold the memorial quickly, to help everyone move forward. His voice was soft, careful, but it felt wrong in Hope's ears. Too polished. Too calm. She wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could sound so steady when their son's laughter had just been erased from the world. But she said nothing. She nodded, numb, and let him take her hand. The memorial was small. Flowers, photographs, soft music that sounded too gentle for the weight of loss. Hope stood in silence, her veil replaced by black lace, her engagement ring heavy and meaningless on her hand. Thomas stayed at the edge of the crowd, watching Liam deliver his eulogy. The words were perfect, measured, emotional, crafted for sympathy. But there was something off in his tone, a hollowness Thomas couldn't ignore. When it was over, Hope left without speaking. Thomas followed, finding her outside near the fountain, where the sound of water masked her sobs. She turned to him, her face pale and empty. "I can't marry him," she whispered. "Not now. Not ever." Thomas didn't try to comfort her. He only nodded because he understood. Some wounds cut so deep they cauterized everything around them. The wedding was postponed indefinitely. The invitations were canceled, The dress packed away, the flowers returned. The house that once buzzed with excitement now stood silent, haunted by what would never be. Hope spent her days wandering from room to room, touching Douglas's drawings, his toys, his half-finished school project. Every object felt sacred and unbearable. Then, one evening, everything changed. Thomas had gone to the police station to retrieve Douglas's belongings. Among them was a phone, cracked, scuffed, but still functional. The officer mentioned casually that the boy had been on a call moments before the accident. Nothing suspicious, the man said. Just bad timing. But when Thomas scrolled through the call log later that night, his heart stopped. The last number dialed belonged to Liam Spencer. He stared at the screen for a long time, disbelief turning to dread. The timestamp matched the exact minute of the accident. He played the scenario over and over in his mind. Douglas, walking home from the art exhibit, phone to his ear, his small voice calling out, "Hi, Liam." Maybe he was distracted, maybe laughing. Maybe whatever Liam said had made him turn, hesitate, step off the curb without looking. Or maybe something worse. By morning, Thomas's grief had sharpened into suspicion. He went to see Hope, who sat curled up on the couch, her eyes dull from sleeplessness. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly, placing the phone in her hands. She stared at the screen, confused. "The police said it was an accident," she murmured. "They did," Thomas replied. "But this was from Liam. Moments before the car hit him." Hope's breath caught. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That can't be right. Liam loved Douglas. He would never—" "I'm not saying he hurt him," Thomas interrupted. "But what if he said something that made Douglas run? What if there was an argument? What if Liam's not telling us everything?" Hope looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few days, that doubt grew, silently but relentlessly. Hope tried to push it away, to convince herself it was impossible. Liam had adored Douglas. He had raised him, loved him like his own. But every time she looked at Liam now, she saw something different. A hesitation in his eyes, a tension in his smile. When she asked about the last phone call, he froze for a fraction too long before answering. "He called to say goodnight," Liam said. "That's all. It should have been enough." But it wasn't. Thomas began to investigate on his own. He visited the traffic control office, requesting footage from the intersection. The clerk hesitated, but eventually relented. The video showed Douglas stepping into the crosswalk, phone to his ear, glancing up once before the car appeared. There was no sound, no context. But Thomas noticed something. The boy's face was tear-streaked, his movements frantic. He wasn't distracted. He was running from something. When Thomas showed the footage to Hope, she broke. "He was scared," she whispered. He was running away from something or someone. The realization hit them both at once. That night, Hope confronted Liam again. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. "Tell me what you said to him," she demanded. Liam blinked, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "The last call," she said. "You spoke to him right before the accident. What did you say?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Hope, he called me, okay? He wanted to talk about his art show. I told him I couldn't talk long. I was in the middle of something with Steffi. He sounded upset, but I thought he was just tired. That's it." "Upset," she repeated. "Why would he be upset?" "I don't know," Liam said, his tone defensive. "You're reading too much into this." But Hope heard the cracks in his voice, the guilt he was trying to mask. When he reached for her hand, she pulled away. "You're lying," she whispered. That accusation hung in the air like a curse. From that moment, their relationship began to unravel. Hope withdrew into silence, her trust dissolving with each passing day. Liam became defensive, angry, desperate to reclaim innocence he couldn't prove. Thomas, meanwhile, hovered at the edges, protective, grieving, quietly vindicated. The press caught wind of the postponed wedding, spinning headlines about tragedy and betrayal. Hope Logan's dream day turns to mourning. Liam Spencer, devastated or deceptive. Forrester Creations tried to maintain control, but even in the fashion world, grief was currency, and speculation sold faster than fabric. Brooke worried for her daughter, urging her to forgive, to move on. But Hope couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Douglas, small, innocent, running into the rain, and she heard Liam's voice echoing faintly behind it. Then came the final blow. A technician from the police department contacted Thomas, explaining that they had recovered partial audio from the call. It was distorted, incomplete, but a few words were clear enough. Liam's voice, "Don't come here, Douglas. You'll just make things worse." That single sentence detonated everything. Hope listened to the recording once, twice, then threw the phone across the room. "He told him not to come," she said, her voice shaking. Douglas must have been trying to see him, maybe to surprise him. And Liam told him to stay away. Thomas watched her with quiet fury.
"He rejected him," he said.
That's why Douglas ran. He was hurt. He wasn't thinking. Hope turned toward the window, tears streaming down her face. "He was just a boy," she whispered. "And he died believing someone didn't want him." The truth was unbearable. Liam's words weren't malicious. They were careless, said in haste, the kind of remark people made every day without consequence. But in that split second, they had rewritten destiny. When Hope finally confronted Liam for the last time, she didn't shout. Her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "You didn't mean to hurt him," she said softly. "But you did. And I can't build a life with someone who reminds me of that every day." Liam tried to explain, to beg, to undo the past, but it was too late. The wedding that had been postponed was now canceled for good. Weeks later, Hope visited the crosswalk alone. The city moved around her, cars passing, people hurrying, but she stood still, holding a single white flower. The light changed from red to green, and for a moment, she thought she saw Douglas in the crowd, smiling, waving. But when she blinked, he was gone. Only the echo of his laughter remained. Thomas watched from across the street, unseen. He didn't approach her. Some distances were sacred. Some wounds didn't need words. As night fell, Hope finally whispered goodbye. Not to Douglas, not to Liam, but to the version of herself that had once believed love could survive anything. The truth was simpler and crueler. Love could heal, but it could also destroy. And in the quiet that followed, under the soft glow of the streetlights, the Forrester family felt the weight of another loss settle into their bones. Not the kind measured in funerals and flowers, but the kind that lived on in silence, the kind that no one ever fully recovered from. The night before everything changed, Los Angeles seemed ordinary. The city glittered beneath a calm sky, the kind of evening that tricked people into believing the world could still hold peace. But for Thomas Forrester, peace had become a foreign concept. Ever since the accident that took Douglas, time itself had shifted, fractured. Every sound felt sharp, every silence unbearable. He lived in a haze of guilt and disbelief, unable to comprehend how something so innocent, a child crossing the street, could end in such monstrous tragedy. But what Thomas didn't yet know was that grief was about to twist into something darker, suspicion. It began a few days after the funeral. The police had called, their tone cautious but precise. "Mr. Forrester, we've identified the car involved," the detective said. Thomas's heart pounded so loudly he almost didn't hear the rest. The vehicle had been traced to a rental company on Sunset Boulevard, but the records were incomplete. The name used for the rental was false, the payment untraceable, and the driver vanished. At first, Thomas thought it was incompetence. A hit and run, another nameless cruelty in a city full of them. But something about the detective's tone lingered, an unease that spread through his chest like poison. When he hung up, he realized his hands were shaking. It wasn't just the lack of answers, it was the shape of the puzzle itself. Everything about the accident felt too neat, too quiet, too conveniently unsolved. He drove the route that Douglas had taken that night, his headlights cutting through the fog like a scalpel. The crosswalk, the intersection, the cafe on the corner, all of it achingly familiar. He had driven this path countless times on his way home from the Forrester studio. As he followed the same turns, the realization began to dawn on him with horrifying clarity. The route Douglas walked was the same as his. His son had taken the same path he always took. At the same time, he usually passed through that intersection. The car wasn't meant for Douglas. It was meant for him. Thomas stopped the car and sat in the dark, staring through the windshield as if the street might whisper the truth. His mind replayed every detail of the past weeks, the strange messages, the anonymous threats, the uneasy sense that someone was watching him outside the Forrester building. He had brushed it off as paranoia, the price of fame and old grudges in a world driven by envy. But now it all fell into place like shards of broken glass forming a single, horrific image. Someone had tried to kill him, and Douglas had paid the price. The thought tore through him with violent force. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, his breath ragged. There was no solace left in logic, no comfort in coincidence. It was murder. It had to be. And the guilt that had once been grief, now transformed into fury. The next morning he went to see Hope. She had barely left her house since the funeral, living in an echo of silence broken only by the tick of the clock and the distant hum of traffic. When Thomas appeared at her door, his eyes hollow, she knew something had shifted. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice shaking. She let him in without a word. He paced her living room, unable to sit. "The police found the car," he began. "It was rented under a fake name. The driver's gone. There's no record of who he was or where he went. And the route Douglas walked, it's the same one I take every day after work." Hope froze, the meaning sinking in slowly, cruelly. "You're saying, I think that car wasn't meant for him," Thomas interrupted, his voice breaking. "It was meant for me. Someone tried to kill me, and Douglas, The words collapsed under their own weight. He turned away, gripping the back of a chair as if it could keep him from falling apart. Hope stood motionless, her breath catching. The room seemed to close in around her, every sound muffled by disbelief. "No," she whispered. "No, Thomas, that can't be true." But the logic was inescapable. The timing, the location, the precision. Douglas had only taken that route because Thomas had promised to meet him there after his late meeting, plans that changed at the last minute. If Thomas hadn't stayed late, if he had left just 10 minutes earlier, it would have been him on that crosswalk. The horror of it consumed them both. Hope's grief, already unbearable, now mutated into something new: rage, confusion, guilt. The idea that her child had died not by random chance, but as collateral in an unseen war tore through her. Every beat of her heart felt like betrayal. "He died because of you," she said suddenly, her voice trembling with anguish. "Because someone wanted to hurt you." Thomas didn't argue. He didn't move. Her words were a knife he deserved. "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm going to find out who did it." Hope stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "And then what? What will you do when you find them?" "Whatever it takes," he replied. That answer terrified her. In the days that followed, the investigation consumed them both. Hope called off the wedding indefinitely. She told Liam she couldn't think about vows or futures while their son's death remained a mystery. Liam tried to be understanding, but beneath the surface, anger festered. He had already watched Hope's grief pull her closer to Thomas than he could stand, and now the investigation bound them together in ways he couldn't compete with. Every time he came home to find Hope sitting beside Thomas, their faces illuminated by the glow of police reports and surveillance footage, a cold dread settled in his chest. "You're letting him drag you into his madness," Liam said one night, his voice cracking with frustration. Hope looked up, her eyes red from crying. "It's not madness if he's right. You think someone tried to kill him?" Liam scoffed. "Thomas has enemies, sure, but a murder plot? That's paranoid, Hope." She stared at him, her expression hardening. "You didn't see the look on his face when he realized it. You didn't see what it did to him." "I felt it, Liam. This isn't random." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You're grieving," he said softly. And he's using that. You've always been his weakness. Don't, she said, her voice breaking. Don't make this about jealousy.
But it was.
Liam knew it. He had lost hope once before to Thomas's manipulations, and though they had rebuilt something fragile, it had never been the same. Now, standing on the ruins of their son's death, he could feel her slipping away again, not because of desire, but because of shared pain. Thomas, meanwhile, was spiraling. He spent sleepless nights poring over old threats, social media messages, and industry gossip. The fashion world was full of rivals, designers who envied him, critics who resented his comeback, investors he had crossed. But this felt personal, intimate. Whoever wanted him dead knew his routines, his family, his vulnerabilities. His mind raced through possibilities. Could it be someone from Forrester's past, an old enemy resurfaced? Or someone inside the family itself? Brooke had never trusted him. Steffi had questioned his mental stability. Even Ridge had doubted him in darker days. The paranoia grew like wildfire, devouring reason. One night, while Hope sifted through the police report, Thomas's voice cut through the silence. It could have been Steffi. Hope looked up, startled. Steffi? Your sister? She's been furious with me since the scandal with Hope for the Future, he said, pacing. She thought I ruined everything. Our brand, our family's reputation. Maybe she wanted to scare me, make me step down. Maybe it went too far. That's insane, Hope whispered, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She would never. Wouldn't she? Thomas pressed. She's done desperate things before. Hope frowned, trying to hold on to logic, but Thomas's intensity was infectious. Each theory, however implausible, carried its own dark possibility. The mind, once touched by grief, becomes a dangerous architect. It builds stories to fill the void left by truth. Days turned into weeks. Their investigation deepened. The police released new information. Tire marks suggested the driver had accelerated before the impact. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. That single revelation shattered the last remnants of hope. Hope sat in her kitchen, clutching a cup of untouched tea, staring blankly at the window. Someone kill my son, she whispered. The words felt foreign, wrong. Her reflection stared back at her, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. Thomas stood behind her, his voice low. They killed our son. She turned toward him, tears filling her eyes. Then we find them. From that moment, they became partners in vengeance. Hope accompanied him to every meeting, every lead. They interviewed witnesses, visited the rental company, traced false documents. Each dead and only tightened their bond. Grief had fused them together in ways love never could. They became a single force, feeding off each other's pain, their shared obsession blurring the lines between justice and madness. Liam watched helplessly from the sidelines, his world unraveling. Hope's texts grew shorter, her presence colder. When he tried to talk to her about rebuilding their lives, she looked at him with distant eyes. I can't think about the future, she said. Not until we know why he's gone. He wanted to scream that she was gone too, that the woman he loved had disappeared the same night Douglas did. But he couldn't reach her anymore. Meanwhile, Thomas's paranoia escalated. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a warning. He began to suspect everyone, Brooke, Ridge, even Donna, who had once defended him when no one else would. The thought of betrayal within his family gnawed at him. They all have reasons to hate me, he confessed to Hope one night, his voice trembling. Every one of them. Then we'll find out which one acted on it, Hope said, her tone steady, almost cold. The transformation in her frightened him. Hope, the woman who had always been light, forgiveness, grace, was now consumed by vengeance. Her grief had become armor, her eyes, weapons. And though part of him knew he should stop her, he couldn't, because she was the only person who truly understood his pain. As rumors spread about their closeness, the media descended like vultures. Hope Logan and Thomas Forrester, grieving together, or something more. The headlines poisoned what was left of her marriage. When Liam confronted her, His voice was raw. "You're choosing him over me." "I'm choosing the truth," she said simply. But the truth, when they finally found it, was far worse than either imagined. A lead emerged, a former Forrester employee, fired years ago for stealing designs, recently seen near the studio. His name was Mason Hart, a designer with a grudge and a history of violence. Thomas remembered him instantly, the man who had once threatened to make him pay. Police traced Mason's rental records and found a connection. He had used fake credentials at the same company that rented the car. The realization hit like a hammer. Mason had wanted revenge against Thomas for destroying his career. Douglas had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. When the police finally arrested Mason, Thomas and Hope attended the hearing together. The man showed no remorse. "You were supposed to die," Mason sneered. "Not the kid. But life's funny that way, isn't it?" Hope nearly collapsed. Thomas caught her as she trembled, his arms wrapping around her instinctively. "It's over," he whispered. But it wasn't. Not really. Because knowing who was responsible didn't bring Douglas back. It didn't erase the blood, the nightmares, the emptiness that stretched between every breath. In the months that followed, Hope's relationship with Liam disintegrated entirely. Trust, once fractured, could not be restored. She moved out quietly, leaving behind a house full of memories and a man who no longer recognized her. Thomas and Hope continued to see each other, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in silence. They didn't label what they had. It wasn't love, not yet. It was survival, two broken souls clinging to each other in the wreckage. But late at night, when the world was quiet and her grief softened into exhaustion, Hope sometimes wondered if Liam had been right all along. Maybe Thomas had wanted this, her dependence, her closeness. Maybe grief had made her blind to his deeper motives. And Thomas, lying awake in his own haunted house, wondered the same. Whether fate had truly cursed him, or whether, in some cruel way, it had given him exactly what he'd always wanted. Hope, back in his orbit, bound to him forever by the ghost of a boy neither of them could ever let go.